Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Zinan. I am a Sloan alumni, and as one of this year's Symposium panel captain volunteer with Zoya Kinsler, we would like to welcome everyone to our panel, Running IT Like a Factory. It is my great privilege to introduce our panel moderator, Steve Rosenbush, who will guide us through the discussion how organizations create value by developing and delivering digital capabilities with quality, consistency, and efficiency. Steve is the editor of the Wall Street Journal CIO Journal, which reports on the strategic use of technology in business and how such a shift is redefining business models, markets, and corporate culture for many organizations. Please join me in welcoming Steve and our panelists.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. We have a great panel, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. One of the ideas that occurred to me over the course of the morning was that there's this drive to automate. There's a drive to automate everything that can be automated, to plow the dividends of that automation into development of innovative products, to bring digital capabilities to market very quickly, that things can be measured, that everything that can be measured will absolutely be measured. It won't be an option to not measure it anymore. And that, what we're here to do is talk about the idea that you can look at all of this as a factory. But that word, I think, is also fraught with a lot of meaning. You can have a factory circa 1963, or you can have a factory circa 2017. So why don't we just go across the lane here, and just talk very quickly about how we see this idea of a factory, and then we'll take the conversation from that point. Chris, since you're on my left, let's start with you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christopher Crummy. This is my 25th year at IBM. I'm responsible for part of our IBM security division, and have actually worked with the IBM CIO's office in lots of different areas. So for us, I think you're spot on. The word factory, when we had our discussion, was, is it a negative connotation of the factory concept, or is it a positive connotation? And we looked at it both sides of that equation. Now for us, there is this idea of the technology. There is this idea of using the efficiencies and exposing things in the API. But honestly, one of the biggest things that we're focusing on is the culture. The culture within IBM, from a development perspective, from the CIO's perspective, is that of an agile culture. I mean, we actually have a senior vice president of agile acceleration. So driving the culture helps ultimately give the results that we're looking for from that factory concept.
Do you see that idea of the factory concept being relevant to what you were doing? Does it describe your business in any way?
I think it does. I mean, if you look at the output of what, let's say, the CIO's office, their job is, the employees are their customers, right, in a lot of ways. So they are designed to provide an international experience, solutions that drive productivity, that drive innovation. So the concept of the factory, having the ideas of being able to leverage the REST-based APIs, the web capabilities, is super important for that speed and that innovation that we're looking for.
Sounds good. Thank you. Suresh, please.
Yeah, so I'm a CIO for BNY Mellon, and I just don't like this idea of me running a factory because it has all kinds of negative connotation. A factory tends to be, you try to repeat something in a sustainable way of the same thing, right? Whether it's a car or whatever. And usually, if you want to change, what you're building, it takes a very long time. What we are trying to do is to digitize what we do, and digitization in our world is through a platform, and the platform evolves, and the services that we offer, is very specific to the market that they do. It's very different. So it's almost like you want the same outcome, which is you want to be able to do faster, better, cheaper, but you do them in a way that you enable a group of people to be able to create services much quicker.
Okay. All right. We'll just quickly move on, and then we'll come back. Lev, please.
All right. Pardon. My name is Lev Lesokhin. I'm with CAST, and we do software intelligence, software analytics, different type of machine intelligence, I suppose. And so we work a lot with some of the biggest development organizations in the world, and those happen to be the systems integrators. And what we've seen is a lot of advances in that space of actually introducing factory concepts to application development and maintenance, and digital. Arguably, software and applications are what drive digital capability. So when you think of factory, and actually I was just with my old Sloan professor, Michael Cusimano, who wrote the book on software factories. I was with him yesterday. You think of things being automatable, repeatable. You think of reuse and platforms, actually, as was mentioned already, and being able to use metrics everywhere that you can to be able to drive lean principles and efficiencies. Lean actually also is a term that was coined here at Sloan, by the way, those of you that don't know. And so there's been, I think, a lot of advance in the industry in using some of these techniques to deliver digital capabilities more quickly, more efficiently. And I think that some factory concepts are actually quite applicable.
Interesting. So we already have two distinct points of view on the table. Great. Peter, please.
So I'm a CIO for Daimler Trucks North America. So Daimler, you may know, like big automotive company like Mercedes-Benz, the Sprinter vans, the trucks. So this IT as a factory is very important for me, because we transformed our organization, let's say, into factory over the last 2 years. And I'll give you an example, because it's for agile and it's speed. But if, let's say, the developer comes to the infrastructure guy and says, hey, I can get my environment in 3 minutes if I go to the public cloud, then the question is, why can't we do this also in our own environment? What's the difference? And this drives the challenge, let's say, to make the change in my team. And I can tell you later how we did that. But it's very key for really delivering continuously results to the business, being agile, and being innovative.
So you would argue that the idea of the factory does in fact apply.
Yes, absolutely.
To what you were doing. Let's talk a little bit about the capabilities that you, Suresh, have brought to the marketplace, and you, Dieter, have brought to the marketplace, or that you've at least helped bring to the marketplace. Let's see if there's a real difference there. And maybe we'll end up with different ideas of what this factory is, or maybe two completely different ideas. Suresh, why don't we start with you? Can you walk us through how you've brought some of your more recent projects to fruition? And I'll let you explain them, but these might include the Nexen Platform or the Digital Pulse dashboard, which is sort of the front end of that platform. And you just briefly tell us what these things are, and then let's talk about how you developed them, how you got there.
Right. I mean, any large company that's been around any length of time, you look at your data center, you probably have everything that was ever invented, right? And in spite of all the investments that people have made over a period of time, very little of that actually gets used, both in terms of the data as well as the applications that people have written. So one of our challenge was we don't get to build everything ground up. A smart thing would be to figure out how to leverage what has already been built, but do it in such a way that enables people to create new products and services at much faster pace. So that was the idea behind the Nexen Platform. So we basically created a hybrid cloud infrastructure a big data platform, an API layer, and an app store for third parties to offer their services, and then have a different client interfaces. It could be a portal, or it could be a chat ops, or it could be an API store. So now the key is, how do you take whatever is in your data center to get this into a highly flexible, a software capabilities that a group of people, a small group of people, at their own pace can create value, in terms of either solving a business problem.
So there's an element of self-service?
Exactly. So what we try to focus on is the time to market aspect of it, right? How quickly can you do something? And the second thing is, how can you create a service, right, with a marginal cost next to nothing? Because what we believe is, companies like Amazon and Netflix and everybody else have shown is with technology that you can create capabilities where the marginal cost is very low and they're able to do it very fast. So how can we leverage those concepts in this platform?
And it's the platform that also really describes the way that you work, or the way this was constructed.
Right. So if you think about, historically, if you have an architecture team of people, who create guidelines and standards, PowerPoint, and you try to get people to use them. This time around, we basically built a platform with all those common services. So that now when we tell people this is how you modernize what you have, so first of all, you don't need to do all of them at once. And second of all, you use what is already there. So it's almost like a guided, with a lot of guardrails that enables people to leverage something.
What, beyond the idea of the platform, and also I should just add, don't wait for me to call on anyone. If you have something to add, especially if you're Dieter at the end of the row, just jump in. Chris, for you too. So I want to ask just a few more questions about how the Nexen platform and the Digital Pulse came into being. You described it as a platform, but how did the platform come into being? And what was the workflow like? How Lev described a whole series of characteristics that he thinks of as a factory: dashboards, automation, standard metrics. Do those things apply? Did those apply to the way that you work?
Yeah, meaning, the basic thing, though, that we try to do is we took the whole company, right? We have about 13,000 IT professionals. And we said, we will, catalog the various business services that we offer. And then for each business service, there's a team of people that support them. And then we try to get, we call them a service leader, act like a CEO of that business, right? If you were a fintech and you're trying to reinvent the business in, let's say transfer agency or, treasury or, custody or fund accounting, any one of those services that we offer, if you were to do that ground up as a fintech, how would you do it? Obviously, you don't get to start from ground up because you already have the clients, you already have the revenue, you already have lots of capabilities. So our challenge is getting people to think different and to be able to compete in the marketplace as though they are digital.
Would it be fair to say that your real objection to this idea of the factory is that you're not building another Nexen platform. You're not producing there's no assembly line here. So while the parts may be reusable and used in other projects, you're building something, you're moving on. So it would be fair to say it's more of an artisanal approach?
Well,
like
maybe it's just a
maybe?
perception, right? So, in one of the CIO meetings, there was a fellow CIO of a car manufacturer, and I happened to drive that car, so I had an idea for the GPS system, what they need to do. He said that's a 5-year life cycle, by the time they think about that,
Okay.
and it becomes a production. Whereas what we are trying to say is, with the whole lean startup, a mentality that you're trying to build something in 60 days, 30 days, and get clients to give you feedback so you can iterate. To me, maybe the future factory, maybe like a Tesla factory,
Okay.
maybe like this,
Okay.
but the factories that I know of,
No.
they're not
All
like
right.
that.
Well, let's go to Lev and Dieter, and let's hear about the factory as you see it, and then Chris, you jump in and let us know where you.
Let me start with the factory. we had a very good approach for our telematics environment, where we had an idea, we had to get this done in a very short time frame. So we pulled everybody in a room and said, let's get it done. So at the end, you can say it's agile, it's speed, it's lean, all that stuff. And then we were very successful because we also pulled in the business. Without business, you cannot do agile. And then on the other side, we had these other areas where it's kind of like KPI, standard architecture, and looking at the workflows and big charts like this is how it works, and workflow, this is how it is. Oh my God, this is crazy. I cannot understand it, so how can I drive it? And if I don't understand it, I'm a smart guy. How can you understand it? So you generate a lot of, let's say, tickets, and then you just waterfall it through. And I said, forget all that stuff. Why does it work in this agile environment, and how can I scale this into my entire area? And this was my main question. So we worked with the teams, and I said, the best is really like if you have 100% dedicated teams, and how I do that. And we had standard architecture that we developed, but some of the time that the developer guys don't know that. They come to the architect and say, I have an idea. Can you implement this for me? And say, let's turn it around. I have a standard architecture, but why don't you use it? Oh, I didn't know, let's try this. And the basic question is simply, let's say, if you go to a public cloud, you can have an environment in 3 minutes. Let's do the same in our environment. So do you want to have something in 8 weeks or now? And very often the solution is exactly what they need, but they didn't know it. So this is what we did. So we have a standard architecture that you can use, and then by push of the button, you automatically generate like a public cloud, an internal cloud solution. This is your environment in 3 minutes. And you walk away.
3 minutes as opposed to how much time previously?
Oh, weeks. Weeks. Kind of 6 weeks. Because sometimes we have a workflow. Oh, I have a question. Oh, can you detail this? Can you do that? So it's kind of like, guys, you need to talk to each other, but how can you make this happen in a bigger organization?
It was a centralized architecture and data that made that.
So this is, and then what we did is we invented what we call the SEAL teams. It's almost like a swarm team. So we had not only one, but several swarm teams that are kind of stand for agile, speed, efficiency, lean, that help you. And these teams are comprised of architecture, UX guys, DBA guys, solution architects. And they are the go-to people that say, hey, use this, do that, and they kind of swarm with the application guys. And right now, everybody is super happy because over a 2 years period, 50% of the projects are agile. We do continuous deployment of, let's say, our solutions. We do more and more automated testing, so we really run this as a factory. Not completely there. Otherwise, we would be super happy, but we're getting there.
Lev had helpfully laid out what he views as some of the characteristics of an IT factory. Why don't you review those concepts, and then let's see how they apply to everyone's work on.
What we had in mind was using automation, having repeatable processes. So you're not only successful once, but you can actually repeat that success. Using reuse and platforms that you reuse, and metrics to kind of measure the whole thing and make sure that you're improving and moving in the right direction. And I just want to say, so those were the things that I laid out earlier. But one of the speakers in the early panel this morning, actually the winner of the CIO award last night, Dave, whose last name I won't remember, he used the phrase digital lipstick, which I think elicited some chuckles in the audience. And that really resonated with me because I feel that a lot of the conversation around delivering digital capabilities is focused on sort of the top layer of what exists within your systems.
Re-engineered to the core.
Exactly. He said that, digital lipstick versus re-engineering to the core. And there's a concept actually in the IT world. I'm sure most of you have heard of two-speed IT, or Gartner calls it bimodal. So the digital capabilities that we're evolving quickly are really just the tip of the iceberg of what we have to have in order to really deliver those capabilities. And the challenge that we see very often is that that core that you need in order to deliver the fast digital is very messy, it's very complex, it's obscure, nobody really knows. No single architect, I will wager anybody in this room, no single architect really knows how a full transaction interconnects all the way from that mobile front end, all the way down through the the middle layers, the middleware, through the data layers, and how all of that works. And that's a real challenge, right?
Cut through that.
Well, there's automation, right, that you can apply to that to create sort of the software intelligence, the software models, right, that you arm your architects with so that they have the knowledge. And then, there are metrics that you can use to sort of evolve your understanding of your architecture.
What about APIs? It would seem to me that the API, which is used to connect to the outside world, has a lot of applicability internally so that you can function much, much faster internally. You're nodding, Chris. I'll let you.
Yeah, I actually want to go back to one of the points here you made about rebuilding from the core.
Mm-hmm.
So what we decided to do, and when you said factory, I think of this kind of monolithic building that has an old way of doing stuff, and there's a traditional hierarchy of the people inside of this situation. What we've decided to do, and I would honestly say that IBM has not only adopted but internalized a really deep agile culture behavior. And I feel like if you don't start with that, then all the other stuff is just a check mark that you've done it. So what we did is we did 52 card pickup. We literally exploded the whole thing and said, all right, let's look at where our talent is. And we used analytics to pick 13 places around the world that this is we're going to focus our domain expertise on, right? We can't go here because we don't have the expertise. We went right down to the core building block of Agile, which is an 8 to 10 person team. We call it the 2-pizza rule. If 2 pizzas can't feed that, then it's either too big or too small. So focus on 2 pizzas. And we said, let's see what out there has the best success with teams. So we picked actually Manchester United, the soccer team. And we interviewed and dealt with their coach for 30 years, Sir Alex Ferguson. And we said, listen, tell us about what makes that team work so well. And he says, as IT, you spend so much time on these things that you don't spend on time of putting the right talent, the right personality, the right focus together on that 8 to 10 person agile team. He goes, as the coach for Manchester United, I spend 70% of my time focusing on putting the right talent into that situation. We do agile academies, so managers and leaders can all go through that situation. We have an agile doctor is in open door to do. So I feel like what we've done is we've literally imploded the way the CIO and the IT infrastructure is created and managed. That 8 to 10 person team, they need to design, test, deploy, read it on all of those things, and that's what they do. And being able to do that, we have 1,800 agile teams that we use now at IBM from the ground up. The managers are measured on how much they're moving forward, how quickly, not that they're perfect, but are they moving in the right direction? So that's how the managers are measured.
So you're sort of looping back to this whole concept of measurement. We can measure the technology and the infrastructure. We can measure people and performance too. How do you do that?
I said earlier, I think when you look at IT, for us, it's about the culture first, then you do the measurements. If you start to go, this is what I want to measure and not support the culture, then I think it's a mismatch, right?
If you look at the most valuable companies today, right? Be it Apple or Facebook or Google or Microsoft.
Or IBM.
Or
Keep going.
The top 5 companies. Would you think of them as factories? I don't believe so, right? Because a factory suggests that somehow that you have a bunch of building blocks that you can go to a regular store, buy them, and put them together, and you have a product, right? So if you take a look at Uber, the APIs they used was the same API that anyone could have used. So why is it that they are valued at $65 billion and others don't, right? And you can say the same thing about Netflix. And for Netflix, they even open source a lot of what they say. So to me, I guess, if you're trying to do commodity stuff in scale, where there is no value added, where people are not willing to pay more, maybe it makes sense. Would I really think of Amazon, who seems to have figured a way to repeat success in so many of what they get into, right? Because today, they're no longer a bookseller, right? They probably process more payments than most financial institutions. They fulfill, right? Now they're about to, they do the cloud, and they're about to get into logistics, right? Would I think of that as a factory?
Well,
I don't think so.
Maybe, but let me just play the devil's advocate here for a moment. Let's say that I'm at LinkedIn, which developed this idea of, what is it, continuous deployment, continuous something or other. Or a company like Shutterstock, which is here, I believe is here on site. They issue something on the order of 700 software updates per month, I believe. It's an enormous number.
50 million changes a year.
So, okay, that's a really big number. How do you achieve that?
Netflix does about 4,000 a day.
Is that not a factory? And if it isn't, I'm not saying it is, but if it isn't, what is it?
It's an interesting point, right? So let's say that there are certain things that can be automated and you can do that in scale, is true, right? And it does help in whatever it is that you're trying to do to be able to do it faster, and if it doesn't work, you fail. But that's not the way typical factories work, though, right? Meaning, to me, I guess maybe that's the disconnection I have. Because a typical factory, it takes some time to create the factory, and then it has a long life, right? And then you go. So unless in the Internet of Things, they have a concept of digital twin kind of a thing. I'm kind of talking about the digital twin, right? How do you create something of value that's easier to change based on market, reaction? And how do you get more people to do that? So if you look at the number of services that we offer, this is almost like saying that if I go to a art store and buy a canvas and a brush and a paint, and tell somebody like a factory, go and make a painting, is that going to be that valuable, right? So what is it about the painting that makes it so valuable? And if you want to play in that market, so we need to compete, right, with something better, right? So in a crowded marketplace, if everybody is offering financial services, I'm not sure if I go tell them that I got a factory that people are going to sign up.
What do you think?
There's a little bit of, I think, innovator's dilemma concept in play here, because it's one thing. So you have to, first of all, you have to separate the mode in which you're developing your capabilities from the actual business model, that you're putting out in the market.
I'm sure everyone is familiar with the mode 1, mode 2
which now people
idea.
think it's dead,
Yeah.
and it is a trimodal IT is what people think it is.
Right. Well, yeah, there's the modes there, but it's when you're creating something from scratch, right? You can be more nimble, you can be more quick, right? And part of the value of the firm, of an existing firm, right, a firm that's been around for a while, is the capabilities that they've developed over time, the customer base that they've, the relationships, the customer base, and all of that, all of those assets, right? And so I think it's one thing to develop something new from scratch that happens to have a business model that's valued highly by the markets. And the sort of development techniques that you use to develop that may be different because you have the opportunity to start greenfield, start new. But then I think the challenge is for existing firms to take that stock, the assets that they have, and turn that into value. Something that can be delivered as value quickly, to use that leverage. And that's where I think, the factory concepts really can come into play.
When I think of, a factory could have, like I said, negative or positive connotations. The output of cloud updates has a level of efficiency that you want, has more factory concept, where one of the things that we've decided to do was kind of combined some of the IBM research that gives us a lot of speed that we normally don't get sometimes, is to give the IBM research teams free rein to develop certain things, and they end up turning into technologies. So probably, for example, one of the most popular things that we did that only took, I think, less than a month from idea to deployment, and it's probably one of the most popular things that we've deployed from IT to everyone, is something that we call CHIP, which is the Cognitive Human Interface Platform at IBM. And so every new hire gets CHIP as a way to interface into all the process. Where's the healthcare benefit site? How do I get tech support on my Mac? How do I do this? We tap into the expertise location, we tap into all these things, but to go back, it's all about these small kind of design-led research projects that turn into very, very powerful deployments.
I think in some ways I sense more consensus than disagreement in that you're all working to bring digital capabilities to market faster and faster and faster. Is that true? Is there anyone who would disagree with that? No, probably not. Can we do, I just wanted to...
We just changed the title.
Right. So I don't want to get too far into the whole nomenclature discussion. We all agree, or you all agree, that it's about bringing digital capability to market faster, more efficiently, cheaper. I kind of actually do want to go into the weeds here for a bit. Not too long, but for a few minutes. Let's just talk about the infrastructure and the architecture that enables that. This is the tooling in the factory or the non-factory. Just maybe a show of hands. Do you view microservices and containers as critical to your organization? Are you making extensive use of APIs internally? No? Yeah? Okay. Would you say that you are, how far, are you more than 50% on your way toward full automation, however you define that? No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it seems that that's still a work in progress.
Yeah, it's also a culture because you have to change also the behavior of the typical programmers, how you work with the infrastructure guys and the architects.
This goes back to Chris's.
Yeah, and you have to break down silos, and you have to also change, let's say, your foundation, as we said before. So you cannot just say, okay, run. You have to stand up a little bit first. You have to run a little faster and walk. So do some walking and then walk faster. So this is how you do this. So this is culture. This is really like working on it, automate everything. So we transformed our, let's say, data center that you would consider as a data center in all virtual, in all kind of public and hybrid cloud. And this is not like done overnight. So this is a process over a certain period of time. We did this in, let's say, a 2-year period of time. So now we're happy and can work then with the next level and say now we do our digital excellence, because you also have, don't forget quality, don't forget automated testing, don't forget all that other stuff and security. So all this stuff, you work a little bit faster. This is what we did over a certain time. Then we used certain tools. We talked about those tools. And the next step that we're doing right now is, let's say, container. So, but you also have to have the programmers trained for that. So when you do agile wrong, you have chaos. So, oh yeah, we do agile. Let's see what happens next. So,
how much of your software is moving to containers? Is it all moving to containers?
It will move, not today. We started that. I can make a guess, but I'm hopefully, let's say, we're happy in a certain area where we started from scratch. It's all containerized. And then if you want to move everything, I would guess, let's say, end of the year, maybe 20%. Next year, I want to have, let's say, 80%. So it's a step. It's also a cultural step with how you work with your team to get there. Not everybody can, oh, yeah, let's have a container. So it's you have to do something to get there.
Your question, though, like how much, where are you in your journey, It really depends, I guess, on in what industry you play, right? In the industry that we play, it's not sufficient. I tell people I got an Airbus A380. I may not have the airports to land, right? I got to work around the airports to make sure they modify their, runways and, on their terminals, right? So, in our case, we got to talk to our clients. So just because if people are used to taking a report or a file, now I tell them an API, some of them will tell us, listen, I don't really have a programmer, so what do I need to do? Or the whole industry, right? So in our industry, right, everyone is working together to get something done. And are they ready? So it's in some ways, what we find is being an early adopter means we are educating a whole lot of people about what being digital means. And even more important, what can we do to help them get there, much faster? The question of containers, to me, I think it's 100%, right? Because it's pretty fascinating.
Why is that? Why it needs to be 100%?
Well, it's actually, I'm kind of predicting it will be, right? And the reason is, though, if you just think about any data center, literally, like you can pick, other than the new ones, any normal company in their data centers, they probably have everything that was ever manufactured. Right? And for the most part, you cannot really reuse any of them other than what it's meant for. So, instead of technology being an enabler, it's an anchor, right? It's holding you back. The container as a concept is phenomenal, right? It's nothing new, actually. People talked about Java as a way that you can write once, run anywhere. People thought maybe SQL, different manufacturer, Those things turned out not to be the case. But so far, the containers, I think, have the promise of being able to say, even IBM is saying they can run the containers. Microsoft is saying they can run the containers, which, to me, the talk of the factory-like environment, you write code and it can run anywhere is fascinating.
I mean, for us, it's also how we are focusing on our partnerships, our Apple partnership, our Box partnership, our Cisco partnership, how we're supporting customers in international locations so their data stays in country, right? So there's this idea of how do we work with our partners, and things like containers and other open architectures is the way that we are accelerating that value.
But containers, it's an architectural concept as well, right? It's not just a infrastructure concept, right? So in order to really utilize containers to their full capacity, I mean, you're developing microservices to run in them, and then that that makes you, it forces you to have to rethink, right, the way your systems are being architected.
How is that rethinking shaping up? What is the new thinking?
Well, so you're looking at discrete pieces of functionality, right, that you're trying to then separate out and to run, in discrete environments, right? And so it kind of comes back to, objects, creating these objects that can then be reused by, other containers or other parts of your digital landscape. And going through that process is actually really challenging.
We get to plug in, though. I mean, that's part of the thing. If you're trying to get to market the fastest, why are you building every single aspect of it? Why not partner and leverage their microservices in your overall solution? So trying to get to market faster is key in that area.
It's really, though, right? Meaning, just think about it. If you have a monolithic application where you got 1,000 people maintaining it, you want to change anything, it takes forever, right? And so the concept of microservices, right, built by two pizza teams, means it gives you a tremendous flexibility where if you don't like the service, you get to change them. And you get to change them, so the consumer and the provider can move at a different speed, which give you a phenomenal opportunity. So for companies like us, where we have 13,000 people, historically, how many people do you need to change a bulb? It would have required a lot of people. So you'll have these constant meetings where people are discussing this forever because the cost of, making the change is very high. I think the microservices allows you to, make the cost of a mistake, very small, and it makes it easy to do it at your own pace. I really think, between the containers and the microservices, it's going to make a lot of difference.
So we started in an area where we defined the microservices and we implemented it. Even like some, let's say, code that was not assigned for container, we containerized it. So you have to define it, and then you have to, let's say, start in an area, and then you expand into other areas. Otherwise, it's kind of like very theoretical. So we want to make it happen, and it really happened, and it really worked. So now we have to convince the product base to say, hey, now work on this container, and provide also patterns for that. And so this is how it works.
But my view there, on containers, is that right now most organizations are just getting started at looking, or microservices, looking at how to deploy those monolithic applications as microservices. I think that once we get a little bit down the road with that, it's going to become a different type of complexity problem than we have today. Like right now, the complexity is the fact that you have that big monolithic thing, and if you want to, it's like software jello, right? You touch it in one place, and it kind of wiggles all over the place until it settles down, right? I mean, that's kind of what it's like to deploy a big monolithic application. So you have to test the living daylights out of it, and really be careful with it. With containers, the piece of jello is much smaller. Presumably. But what's going to happen is you're going to have these little pieces of software intertwined with each other, all kind of interconnected. And then the complexity is going to be more in managing that modularity as opposed to managing essential complexity within a big chunk of software. So,
how important is the API to breaking up what Ross Mason, who's the founder of MuleSoft, refers to as the ball of mud inside of many large organizations? And his view is, well, you have to be able to communicate, you have to have common standards internally, just the way you have common standards that you can communicate externally. Once that happens, it creates opportunities to develop all sorts of new business models as well. But where are you in that process of adoption?
So, on Wall Street, though, the concept of microservices or RESTful API conceptually has been there for a long time, right? Even back when I was a developer, it was not uncommon for us to have a message-oriented architecture where every thing that you're trying to do, the whole industry on Wall Street runs on messages. I think the thing that's different this time around, right, and people then tried this service-oriented architecture. The thing that's different now is, irrespective of just like a TCP/IP, that made the internet possible, I think the RESTful API truly is going to allow the different service providers to have a common language by which you can consume a service. And I think that, the ability to have the developers not having to retrain every new thing is going to make a difference.
What is the ultimate consequence of all these new tools and capabilities? To what extent have you seen your business models change and evolve as you put these elements into use?
It's deep, and you have this system that don't have an API. You have to program an interface. They have to discuss, or maybe outside software that you have to use. Takes time. Long time, and then you have to agree on a certain what kind of data do I get and how, whatever, right? So if you have an API and you have a master API, it's speed because you have it instantaneously and you can use it right away. So this changes the game.
I mean, for us, just this one major point. Watson, literally the cornerstone of where IBM is heading, is made up of 38 APIs. That's what Watson is made up of. So developers can go and pull down text-to-speech, and they can do all sorts of capabilities by assembling the major APIs of Watson into a solution. So we see it, Hilton Hotel has a concierge as a robot that greets people, and that's all pulled off the cloud, right? So the ability to use and expose a lot of that logic and capability as APIs is how you grow the ecosystem, and that, to us,
externally.
Correct, externally. And that's how the iPhone grew. If you look at the iPhone without the application capabilities, it was just a phone.
Where is IBM in the adoption of APIs internally?
Well, based on first of all, in a lot of ways, what we end up doing is we fundamentally change the way that we integrate with our partners. So, for example, I come into IBM in the morning, I single sign on through SAML, and that gets me to my cloud for IBM, that gets me to Cisco, that gets me to Box, that gets me to what I would consider IBM partners, Workday. So we expose a lot of kind of me as an individual, we remove a lot of those issues. I have one username and password for everything that I do at IBM.
What is it?
It's Chris Hot Pants. You asked.
But you know, why can't you tell Watson, hey, it's me, log me in?
Right, and you'll be surprised that we are using both analytics and cognitive capabilities to not only understand who you are, but who the bad guys are. Right?
You
So
know,
it's the behavior analytics of how a bad guy happens is actually part of the listening that we do. So it works on both sides.
so you asked, you know,
So I have a bad
what,
moment, I'm a bad guy then. I don't let you into my system.
so you know, so what's the difference, right, with the API? You know, the thing though that I, you know, lose sleep over is, you know, Instagram was created by 10 engineers. Or Skype was created by 27 engineers, right? And WhatsApp was created by 32 engineers. So you no longer have to be this humongous, large global company with a huge balance sheet to create something that 1 billion people can use, that you can change people's lives. So, you know, if you are a large company, the question you need to ask yourself, which 10, 12, 15 people anywhere in the world, because they no longer need the infrastructure, they no longer need the money, all they need is ideas, right? Or the ability to understand a client need, and they're able to create something that could compete with you before you can blink. So to me, you know, this whole cloud, APIs, microservices, that's what you need to worry about, right? So one, we could be just sit there and wait for something to happen to you, or, you know, you try to say, hey, you know, if those 10 people can do this, why couldn't our 13,000 people in teams of 10 or 20 can do the same thing? Yeah. So that's our whole model, that how can I have a platform that enable, in our case, 170 plus teams that are trying to solve problems, but hopefully independently be nimble and to get the same advantage, right? Because unlike a startup, we have the clients, we have a great balance sheet, we are highly profitable, right? So we have all the advantages that the startups want. You know, so now what can we learn from the startup so we can take this to the next level?
We did, I'll go on this point here, is that to build that concept, we put an official program called Cognitive Build. So we challenged every IBM employee to get to a team, come up with an idea how cognitive will change the world. We had 28,000 ideas, and then we went through this idea of something called You Fund It. So every IBMer got 2,000 fake dollars, and we get to vote on all of these cognitive ideas. They got down to 50, then 50 of them were vetted down to 8, and they had 8 finalists. And they were like ideas of how cognitive could help autism, things of that nature that were just unbelievably powerful. But that idea of putting an official program and branding and kind of you speak with your own $2,000 to support these ideas, you're driving a culture of innovation and idea stacking that you don't normally get. So it was a powerful way of both having regular employees and IT employees come together and generate this experience.
I mean, the way you measure success, though, I mean, I read an article recently, right, which talked about, I think they picked 10 public companies, and they said, what percentage of their revenue comes through digital, right? So if you truly want to think that we are making an impact, then that's a question we need to ask ourselves, right? So you had a traditional client base and you had a traditional way of making money, and how does all these things that you're trying to do to digitize the firm, how is that making a difference?
The point is when you have, let's say, talk about these 2 pizza teams.
Yes.
It's like if you have, let's say, thousands of employees, like 100,000 or 300,000, you cannot feed them with 2 pizzas, so you have to divide them up in many 2 pizza teams. So it's really like a change of this culture and the leadership. It's how do you generate these agile teams? How you do incubator? How you get these ideas? Is there a platform for innovation? How do you get entrepreneurship in those little teams? How, let's say, as you said, you have 10 people that do something, but you have, let's say, many 10 people that do something, and how does it combine in order to get something bigger? So this is the challenge that we have, let's say, and we do, and we change a lot in our culture and leadership. how to get there. So this is a total transformation of these companies that survived 100 years like us, because you constantly reinvent this company, and with this modern technology.
We're going to take a few questions from the audience. Let's start at the top. Deborah M. Cooper, how is technical debt addressed in your or your customer's factory process? Anyone?
I'm sure he has no technology debt, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, who represents the oldest company?
I think I do. 232 years, I think.
I was told to do no math today, I was told.
It doesn't mean that we have any technology that's that old. But, listen, we have an innovation center in Silicon Valley, and so we get to interview people, and I was interviewing someone from Facebook, and he was telling me about technology debt. What are you talking about, technology debt? So I don't know of any company that's doing anything of value that doesn't have a technology debt. So my feeling is somehow people think it has something to do with how old you are. But it's a major problem, though, because it does impede your ability to move forward. So the way we are doing it is obviously trying to create a layer in between of APIs, because that gives you the flexibility to either consolidate or eliminate or replace with something else.
We're going to try and get through as many of these as we can. Vinita Kumar, CEO of Advantech Partners, considering CIOs are at the center of digital transformation and biz impact, what IT functions should be run like a factory versus not? Examples from your respective companies would be great to hear. Dieter, let's go to you.
So every part of the IT should be, let's say, organized as a factory, because at the end there's the customer orientation, there's agile, there's speed, there's the expectation that you continuously deliver, and all your organization has to deliver something. So you have to really organize it as a factory. So from every aspect, from digital foundation, digital excellence, and your digital transformation, this is how we organize it. This is how we changed it.
A question from Anonymous. Lev, I'd like to address this one to you. How do you design foundational architecture in an agile environment?
Well, I think Agile fundamentally is an iterative process. And so what you want to do is you want to let it evolve, right? But then you want to make sure that you're actually applying some sort of rules around the way that architecture is evolving, and that you're measuring those rules and making sure that, for instance, like if you want to use APIs, right, and you want to reuse certain components, that's something that you can measure. You can actually track as you develop, and you can actually put that into your technical debt metrics, to use technical debt, the metaphor that was brought up earlier, and put some governance processes around that to make sure that your architecture is evolving and being used in the right way.
I think that doing Agile without some kind of a strong platform or a blueprint, you're going to end up with a whole lot of snowflakes, right? So that's like trying to build an interstate highway with no blueprint and say, go build a mile at a time.
Right. This is a question I think that'll be interesting for everyone to address. This is from Anonymous, by the way, should you build your own platform for your factory app development, or use a third-party platform like Cloud Foundry? What are the pros and cons for each? What's the right way to look at the choice? Chris, let's start with you and then just race down the row.
Yeah, I mean,
he will say we should use Bluemix, right?
Yes, he will.
yes, we should use Bluemix, exactly.
Which is based on Cloud Foundry.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, for us, I think what we're looking at is not necessarily reinventing the wheel certain times, but for example, the relationship with Apple that we've done is we've taken the idea of an app store, and now inside IBM, and IBM is the largest Mac shop in the world. We do like 2,700 Macs per week at IBM deployed. So how an IBM employee gets onboarded with this new Mac, we do it through an IBM Apple App Store. So this idea of not say having to rebuild everything, but leverage some of these great ideas that exist, Genius bars, all that type of stuff. So for us, it's not necessarily the technology, but leveraging the good ideas, the good concepts.
I would say it'll be crazy for anyone to try to build their own platform, right? The good news is so many companies have open source stuff, right? Whether it's we're actually a Cloud Foundry Gold member, and the sheer and we now use Mesos and Marathon and all that. So I think there's a tremendous amount of open source that's out there. And so you got to have enough people who understand how to make use of it.
To me, it depends on what you consider the platform. If the platform is your the functionality that's specific to your business, then it's something that you're developing. Now, you're developing it on a platform like the Foundry or what have you, but you're going to be developing that functionality as a platform, as a set of services or APIs that are then exposed to the rest of your your business or your customers. So that's something you have to develop yourself.
So we're big enough and crazy enough to do our own platform, but we also have a hybrid platform. So we selected 4, let's say, cloud providers to be our partner for hybrid cloud. And why 4? Because there are many others. Because you have to integrate them with your IAM. So identity management is very important. If it's not seamless, you're screwed, because from a practical way, it doesn't work. Then you have to have your data gateway. How does data flow back and forth? So these are practical things, and you cannot do this with all. You have to really integrate that. And then we use this for, let's say, IIS and PAS, and then we have tons of, let's say, SAS, so service as a software as a service. So this is how we integrate that. But we also have our own platform. For some of our crown jewels that we have, we don't put this somewhere, so we have this. So this is how they coexist.
These are really good questions, by the way. Dieter, let's stay with you this time, and we'll just come right back down. From Telly Theodoropoulos, is it really an all-or-nothing approach to running IT as a factory? If so, does it stifle innovation?
That's a good question. Let's say innovation is very important, because if I don't have, let's say, enough horsepower to look at innovation, so when I run the normal business as, let's say, as a factory, I have enough, let's say, manpower, time, and money to look at innovation. And if you have innovation, it's also speed. So if I don't, let's say, innovate with all at the same speed, it's too late. Because you have an idea, and if you said you collect like 20,000 ideas, so I guess we have similar tools to collect ideas. And if from idea to, let's say, selecting the idea to really implement the idea, it takes too long, it's already too late. So it's also like speed, and then speed means, again, for me, running this as a factory. So it doesn't contradict, it helps.
Lev?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's an all or nothing. I think you apply different factory concepts to different parts of the digital value chain, right? So for application management, for instance, some of the type of IT automation that actually services vendors have pioneered, like IBM Global Services or Accenture and those guys, using machine learning to make that process more automated, more predictive, more efficient, and kind of managing the pyramid and measuring what's happening in the development realm. I mean, those are some factory components that are applicable to application management that's relevant to your kind of legacy base that's evolving. But then when it comes to the innovation piece, the factory components that you're applying are going to be different. It's going to be building the new platforms. It's going to be automating the whole build cycle, right? And using some of the kind of lean development concepts there. So it's not all or nothing. It just depends what part of the value chain you're in.
Suresh?
So we like to optimize the way the developers spend their time. So clearly we don't want them spending time doing mundane things. So all those things we want to automate. But the act of listening to clients, creating a product, getting feedback, that ought to be at the.
We are actually out of time. I'm going to leave the last 10 seconds to Chris, and then we'll turn it over.
I mean, I agree with everything they said. I think one of the things that people don't focus on enough is culture. The most powerful thing you can do with another human being is basically make them feel. So when our agile teams see that the executives and the leaderships are also going through agile situations, then they understand that they're a part of this larger machine. So understanding the culture and the feel is really important.
We have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Stephen. Great discussion.